Hi, everybody. I am a landscape design, build, and maintenance firm, Formula Landscaping, and about a decade or so ago, I just realized that there was just a vast hole in the understanding of nature and fire and how it all affects us in an urban wildland interface, and just started to focus on how we can help people understand where the true dangers are. And as you'll hear today, the number one most important thing is to home harden, and then we can use our landscaping to bolster those defenses.
Tim Bauer?
Yes, hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Tim Bauer. I am a Senior Vice President with Allied Restoration, and we also have a sister company, Allied Disaster Defense. I have personally been involved working with homeowners to help them recover after fire and water damage emergencies for the past 20 years. And I know what you're all thinking. I don't look old enough to have been in this business for 20 years, and I really appreciate everyone thinking that. The other thing about a few years ago, we started noticing that wildfires were becoming increasingly common. And we work primarily with clients on the west side of Los Angeles. We rebuild a lot of homes in Malibu after fire and water damage. And when Woolsey happened, some of our insurance professionals that we work closely with were telling us that in a few years, we were going to be experiencing a significant crisis with California homeowners being able to insure their homes because of this wildfire risk. And that's what initially got us into this space. Our goal now, every time we enter a property that's been damaged, is to make sure that that house never experiences a similar disaster again. And that's what led us to start Allied Disaster Defense. We primarily employ current and retired firefighters and other scientists to be able to fire model at properties, to be able to give good recommendations on how they can harden their properties and hopefully secure insurance coverage and protect themselves and their families and their properties in the future. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tim. And it looks like Jay was here and then we lost Jay again. This is the challenge of being outside as much as we want to be outside most of the time. I'm going to kick it over to the panel because I know you guys have been through this before, and then hopefully Jay will rejoin us here in a moment.
I think the challenge is going to be that Jay was going to kick off the question and answer. The kind of discussion was going to come from Jay. So
that is a challenge. That is, yeah. Jay's back now.
Okay, good.
Hopefully he can get back here in a second. It's maybe hard for everyone else to believe, but we did rehearse this and everything was fine as of yesterday. Everything was fine as of yesterday. Although it's not a good event unless there's some kind of technical challenge. That's really how it works. Okay.
Ben, can you see me now?
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, we can hear you, Jay. You're on deck. It's over to you to pick things up.
So I apologize for that. My computer decided to do Zoom updates as I was here. So hopefully we can start again. So thank you, everybody. So I'm a forester by trade. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
So I'm a forester by trade, and so that relationship between the environment and housing becoming part of the environment is something that has been a challenge for us for many years. And like some of the panelists that have mentioned before, it has become a passion of us to try to find the solutions. And the solutions happen on many different levels, but the home especially, and Tim Bauer and I say this all the time, we gotta start thinking like the three little pigs. We gotta build the house for the proper type of storm that it's gonna come your way. And we have done very well with buildings. We have a great systems to avoid fires from going from room to room or floor to floor. We can take that down to the home level or business level or apartment building level in fire hazard separate zones. So the idea to working on that is a passion of all of us. And after retirement, my involvement with the California Board of Forestry And now with the California Wildfire Mitigation Program, that we'll talk a little bit more about later, is a commitment that we have. Saying that, I think we'll have challenges of how do we manage that. And I would like to ask Amy first. Amy, what do you see out there? What are the challenges that you see as you encounter as you pitch with us?
And Amy, if I could just let Jay know, Jay, I think the challenge is with your headset that you have on. It sounds like it's the Bluetooth, it's not syncing up. So you might want to move to a different microphone while Amy answers this question. It sounds to me like the headset. So I just want to give you that note. Sorry, Amy, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine, because I was actually going to ask him to repeat, or if somebody could translate. I'm not sure I actually heard or understood the question. Maybe Ben, if you want to at least try to narrow.
My understanding was he was asking around the challenge about education when it comes to thinking about, I think, the home design first. That was my understanding of what he said, but it was choppy. It was tough to make it out.
Okay. Do you mind, Jay, repeating your question again?
No, I think Ben said it just the right way. This is what are the challenges that you encounter out there?
Okay, great. Yeah, no, thank you. I think, as Cassie mentioned, it's not just the home, right? So the home exists on a site. So the first thing, and interestingly enough, there's a lot of parallels between, in some ways, modular construction and the site readiness to design a home. So the first thing we're looking at when we're looking at whether or not somebody can build modularly, we're doing a feasibility study. We want to understand where's the home going to sit on the lot. So not only are we thinking about the crane placement, the truck placement, we're looking at the existing site conditions, because we're also looking at, with the architect, the siting of the home, the shading. So there's so many things that come into play when you're designing a home. And then the fire resiliency is that additional layer that we're talking about. Now we're saying, we're placing the home, we're creating this defensible space around it. So we like to educate the architects to help them understand the value of building a really airtight envelope. So the idea about designing for defense is keeping embers out of your home. So we want to be able to create that airtight exterior wall with the materials that we're using on the outside. We're using really small mesh for any particular vents that we may have. We're going to be careful about the placement of those vents. We want to make sure that there's not one single gap that's larger than 1/8 of an inch anywhere around your house, because as Mike is going to demonstrate later, it's those flying embers that can come in and start a fire within your home. So it's not only what we're doing on the outside, we want to just keep that really tight envelope. So I would say that's the first thing that we're really talking about.
And thank you, Amy. That's the fortress that we got to build to make sure that nothing comes inside. But you mentioned something very important, which is the landscape around it. And sometimes one comes and then the other one follows. So saying that, Cassie, would you give us what are your challenges working with developers, working with people like Amy, and trying to create a synergy between the landscaping and the fire safety?
Well, I'll start with saying that probably working with people like Amy makes my job a lot easier, because when you have two professionals that are knowledgeable and coordinating on the inside and the outside together, that makes the world of difference. And it certainly builds a lot of confidence in, the client and the builder and whatever is going on there. I think that from the experience that I draw from is a lot of existing landscapes and remodeling and re-envisioning and transforming those with so many different goals in mind. And the emphasis, it's so funny, the emphasis immediately goes out onto the landscape when people are thinking about where they are sited in a wildland urban interface. And I've had recent experiences just in the last year where I've actually turned down saying you really need to hit this list of home hardening checklists before we even look at the landscape, because once we start the landscape, you won't be able to do those things. And so I think that really surprises people, because for so many years we've used terms like brush clearance, things that give people some real visuals that foliage is the danger. And when we're able to help people understand that if they can focus on the house first, that's how they can be the safest. And then I can come out and I can help them manage their maintenance on their legacy trees, place foliage that has a proper hierarchy and clustering with proper distancing away from the home. And now we're building out that defense through the landscape and extending it outward away from the house. So it's a very hard concept because, when we think of fires, we see the forest and the chaparral burning, but it's when it gets to our home that poses the real danger. And so there's just a bit of a misconception about how it all works based on the visualizations and misconceptions I think we've created over decades.
You're muted, Jay.
Muted, Jay.
I keep unmuting myself. I'm back again. Thank you, Cassie and Amy. I know that brings all that together in there. But you mentioned another very good factor, which is rebuilding and restoring or renovating a home. And Tim Bauer, when you guys go and especially somebody had experience that they had some kind of damage in their homes, what is the understanding of the damage? And I know you go and make it better for them, but what are the challenges that you encounter when you go do that for the restoration part, first of all, but now that you're working on the defensible part of the world, how you translate that, those challenges you have into this world of fire hazard reduction starting from the home out?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I think I got that. You're starting to have some audio issues again, a little bit of choppiness, but with respect to educating the clients, this panel had spoken previously at another event, and I was really surprised because one of the questions we received in the Q&A was from a nice young lady that was sitting in the second row, and she asked, well, would it make sense if I just built my home out of steel with a steel roof? And I remember I wanted to chuckle a little bit at first, but then I realized that she was being 100% sincere with this. And, I realized that I think a lot of the challenges we face when it comes to education is we hear all these things as homeowners. We hear about defensible space and landscaping, and we've been hearing about native plants for years, and we've been hearing all of these things. And sometimes I think it kind of feels overwhelming. It's like when my kids have to clean their room and it's a tornado has hit it and they don't know where to start. And I think we as adults face the same thing with our house. What do I do first? Do I fix my roof? Do I fix my vents? Do I fix my plants? And what ends up happening is, like my teenager, nothing happens. We get overwhelmed and we just don't start. And so I think that when we make recommendations to homeowners, one of the things that I think is very important is that we explain that what is of most utility to them when it comes to wildfire prevention. And the key is just getting started. Wildfire mitigation efforts in your home do not require you to live in a steel box in the middle of a pavement moat. That is not what wildfire mitigation requires. You can have beautiful landscaping. I love Cassie's background, by the way, because I know, that's not what we typically think of for being wildfire resilient. We don't want any plants. Again, steel building in the middle of a pavement moat. We want to make home hardening beautiful. There are products that are available that do not detract away from the aesthetic of your property. You can have a gorgeous home that's also safe from wildfire mitigation. I think that's really important. Earlier, Jay shared the fact that we use the analogy of the three little pigs a lot, you know, and I think that's a story that we all remember as kids. The one pig built his house out of straw and another one out of stick, and the wolf was able to just come and blow them over. How do we build houses of brick that are built for the threats that we face? Science has answers for this, and I think for us, the most important thing is educating how we can scientifically implement mitigation efforts, things like ember resistant vents, without making the house ugly. We were watching the footage of the coastal fire in Laguna Niguel. It was a one-night fire. It burned 20 large properties. Every single one of those homes burned from the top down. Fire embers entered the vents and they burned the entire houses down. And that is oversight that could have easily been prevented if the builders were educated enough to provide ember resistant vents for these fairly new homes, or at least provide them with quotes to upgrade. So that's our goal as builders, is how can we make this easy and beautiful? How can we protect our clients?
Thank you, Tim. I'm going to try this. Thank you, Ben, for the suggestion. Hopefully it works better. So you're just going to hear this voice. I like to show my face, but it's okay. I have a radio voice, I think. Anyway, so Tim, that is like an excellent example. And one of the things that we tend to blame, I'm glad that you mentioned that, we tend to blame is the environment. We tend to blame all that vegetation around us, national parks, Forest Service, and all that gets all that blame thrown their way. And we try to put the solutions away on the neighbors, especially if it's an agency or somebody like that. Being in the Resource Conservation District and managing lands or help managing lands that way, Clark, how do you try to put all that together with the current mentality that we try to overcome, and trying to change that idea that is my neighbor in the big forest to what can I do in my own home?
Well, the first thing is mom and dad taught me, always be polite, particularly when talking with a fire chief. I've had recent extensive experience of that when we're not necessarily seeing the numbers the same. As Cassie pointed out, well, first of all, so I'm trained as an architect and now I design habitats. So it was natural for us to get into the wildfire mitigation, which is really an ignition prevention design business at the RCD, because we got into it because we're trying to preserve habitats, and the greatest threat lately in the drought and wildfire intensive years is a threat from people trying to remove habitat entirely from a fear-based perspective. So the way we focus it is like, because we can't start with design writ large in the landscape, I try and remind people that if your home does not ignite, wildfire isn't an issue at all. It's an inconvenience because you'll probably have to evacuate. But if you come back, you're never going to cry because your landscape burned while your house is still standing. You're going to cry with joy because your house is still standing. When you start from that perspective, you're like, aha, I can replant, redo my garden. But I can't easily rebuild my house. And by the way, everyone is chronically underinsured. The system's set up to underinsure you. When there is a wildfire, you won't be the only house lost. If you're unfortunate, as people from Woolsey have learned, that creates a whole microeconomy that makes you even more underinsured. So we've really, the best insurance is to invest in, and by the way, if you've gotten kicked onto Fair Plan, like I have again, living in the same house for 30 years, I've been on Fair Plan, off Fair Plan, back on Fair Plan, off Fair Plan. I'm back on Fair Plan now, but my town is a certified, oh goodness, now I can't remember. Anyway, we've got yeah, thanks. And so I get 10% off there, and I'm taking what I saved by not going with, by the way, I could have maintained my insurance. I just would have paid literally 3 times as much. So I'm saying, okay, I dodged a bullet. Now I've got to discipline myself to put that budget into my house rather than paying it out as that expanded fire premium, because that's the way to approach it, right? So is again, what Tim was pointing out, there are a lot of things that you can do. You can create a kind of budget on defensiblespace.org, which is a multi collaborative entity. In fact, everyone on this call probably almost was part of the technical advisory group for that. You can look there and get all the details you want, but the key thing is that if you start with a home, you can prioritize. We have a little graph for every treatment you would do with your house, and its benefit, fire resistance, ignition resistance benefit, and cost. And what you're looking for is low cost.
Did audio cut out for you guys as well, for Clark? Yeah. Clark, we lost your audio. You were coming through clear, but it just disappeared.
I don't even think he hears us.
It
Yeah.
doesn't sound like he hears us either. I could text.
Clark, we can't hear you.
Your audio cut out, Clark.
We should develop a universal hand signs for Zoom, so that everybody knows. Like,
I guess back to you, Jay, for a moment, for the next question.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll get back to Clark there in a minute, but he brings a great point. And now we have all these experts that have all this knowledge, and we're looking at a way to get it to the communities. And nothing better to have a community member or an ex-mayor or somebody that in this group that knows very well how these messages are being distributed, are being given to the general public. Mikey, what are the challenges that you see of this information getting down, and how we can do a better job reaching you and reaching your community to start with?
Thanks, Jay. I'm going to break it down into sort of two buckets. The first is, after a large fire, for about a year, people are traumatized, they're angry. Well, they might be traumatized a lot longer, but they're really angry, and they're screaming at every agency they can to do more. And but then the following year, they're screaming just as loud for more soccer fields. So as human beings, we have this move forward mentality as a species, it looks like, and people just move on. And that is a huge issue, because as I think we all acknowledge, if you don't harden your home, it'll probably burn down eventually. It's in the particular environment we live in. So I think from my perspective, the second part then becomes, how do we get to these experts? How do we get everyone on this panel involved? Number one, I think legislation has to be involved at some point, particularly on new building. And certainly it's been upgraded. Pretty much I've been to every new home that's been rebuilt in Malibu, and the vast majority of them I'm not worried about in the next fire. Couple, could have been a little better, but overall, as long as they remember to close the windows and doors, they look really good. And so that's the new rebuild homes aren't really the problem. The problem are the homes that are left standing, especially older homes. And older homes typically in Malibu are owned by older people and people that are not billionaires and movie stars. So we run into two issues there. Number one, as was already mentioned, they don't have a clue what to do. And then eventually they do nothing, despite everything we do to educate them as best we can as a city. And most people don't actually look at city communication at all anyhow. So there's that little issue. And then it comes to the cost. So I am a big believer that fire insurance should be related in some way to how fire hardened and resilient your home is. but how do we get there? I think that we're better suited to spend money as a state and a county on helping people harden than we are with some of the other ways we're spending money preparing for large fires. You're not going to stop the fire. I think we need to acknowledge that a lot sooner than we are right now. So I know with the city of Malibu right now, we're going to get another pocket of money for some mitigation projects. And what we're thinking of doing, I don't know if they're going to pull it off. I don't get to pick that, but we're going to let people who have had a home hardening assessment apply first, so that we know that they're making inroads and they want to harden their home, because that seems fair. If they're doing other items around their house, their landscaping, dead trees, whatever it is, I think that's fair. So it's some way we got to find a way to make it financially feasible, particularly for fixed income, blue collar, people just without the means to harden their homes. And that's the challenge on the city level, because at some point, as is already said, people just stop listening and move on with their lives. Thanks.
Thank you, Mikey. You raised some great points, and having that ability to get to the citizens and maintaining it there. So it seems to be that consistent message is important to maintain. And talking about consistency, Clark, you were in the middle of very great talk. So can you please continue, please?
Yeah, I'm going to continue as an icon just in case that was the issue. Are you hearing me now? Okay, so there I am. I'd be embarrassed. I probably rambled on long after you couldn't hear me. What was the last thing anyone remembers? If you could help me.
You were talking about embers that can burn the home.
Right. So again, the way that you handle that is just, it's like, you know how the seismic scale, if you've grown up here or live here for any time, an earthquake that is a little bit bigger and it's logarithmic, right? So every time, it's the same thing with distance from the home. The skin of the home it's scientifically shown to be 87.76% of fire resistance. I just made that up, but the point is that you start with the skin of the home, you start with the vents. And by the way, ugly versus pretty, while you're at it, just get some hardware cloth over some steel mesh that is at least no larger than 1/8 inch over the vents that you have. And then there are some really good companies that will give you quotes and can actually size your vents properly and make sure you're getting proper airflow, like BrandGuard, starts with an H. Help me out, somebody. Very good company. Anyway, there are companies out there that will basically give you quotes for nothing to replace and design it properly. So, but start with hardware cloth. Caulk is your friend. Gorilla tape works in a pinch on a red flag day for something you haven't gotten to. You just imagine any place you could throw a wood match at your house, and imagine tens of thousands of wood matches. If they hit something, land on a ledge, and you feel like it could start a little fire that might be a bigger fire, fix that problem. That's where it goes from. And then the first 5 feet, if there's nothing there to start a little fire and you're maintained, the habitat can be maintained from that point on. It's really not about the landscape as much. Now, that's not to say that flame contact and heat is not an issue. I see there's a comment in the Q&A that we'll get to about intense heat and damage from that. So you do have to do things in the landscape, but start with your house while you got time and attention span, because it helps with professionals, and the RCD will put some resources up. We have home ignition zone evaluations to help you to come out for free and evaluate. We have some follow-on design help after that. So there's programs you can get into to help you, but But if you go to the website and start with a house, you'll be in good shape.
I have something I wanted to add. I don't know how formal we were being with raising our hand. I think it's important. This is all resonating really well with me. I'm only a stone's throw away from the Fairview fire right now. So I'm under the next tier of evacuation orders. So if I leave, I've been evacuated. But I wanted to bring the attention that we also need to work with local cities and counties on making them rethink some of their original policies on things that maybe sound right in the beginning, but now we're noticing more and more could have an adverse effect. One of them coming to mind out in my neck of the woods, out in Riverside County, we had a big discussion on larger properties that are up in the hillsides that maybe don't have great access to roads and don't have a lot of water supply, where a fuel helicopter or to pick up water can drop. And so a lot of the residents out there wanted to put together a pond or small lake that they could pull from. And the county pushed back and said, well, we don't have any permits for something like that. And in order to build one, you're going to need to treat it as a permit for a pool, which means now you have to have a fence around it. If you have to have a fence around it, it has to be special monitoring devices. You have to have it there. And you have to be so far from a property setback, and it can't go across several properties. And it became such an expensive situation that they dropped the idea. Well, I know that that area has been torched in this last fire, and it begs the question on whether an extra lake or pond up there would have had a benefit in fighting the fire. Another thing is on my property, I'm about 5 acres. When I put my property in, I did a fire clear with the brush, and the county came back and said, you can't clear that far. We need native species. So you're clearing back about 100 feet. We need to reduce it to about 25 feet. Now, the backside of my house is full hillside of brush, and I have eucalyptus trees right up to the corner of that. So it was very concerning, and it was a fight to talk with the county on letting me to push back that brush, even though it was all on my land. They wanted it as close to the house as possible because it looked nicer, and because they're worried about those native species and keeping all the soil intact, even though I was planning to plant something there anyway. And then lastly, in Burbank, when I was part of the Burbank Sustainability Commission about 10 years ago, there was a big push on water restrictions, but you had to have a lawn. So what does that happen is if you're close to the hillsides and you've got a lawn and you have to keep it watered, and there's some water restrictions, so you can't keep it watered, and you still have to have a lawn, well, that just turns into people just having dead grass in their front yard. And we all know how dead grass sits there, and then you don't go out and mow it quite as frequently. And then the people that were right along those hillsides, an ember comes down, you can light the lawn pretty easily. So I think it's my point is a lot of cities and counties have policies that have been around for 15, 20, 30 years. It's time for them to start thinking about, okay, let's look at the reason you have these requirements. Let's look at them with some common sense and find solutions that can really help some of our citizens.
Yeah, you guys allow me, I can give a couple of pointers to Brandon. Brandon, thank you so much for your input. We appreciate that a lot. And having been there yourself and seeing what happens is very, very important. So there's two things that can help that with light. So like I said, I work with state government, and one of the things that we have done is moving the hazard mitigation plans from the back of the shelf to become part of the general plan. So you have 7 elements right now: safety elements, a housing element, open space element, that are in the general plan at the very forefront of the cities, because exactly what you said, the governor's trying to, or the state is trying to get the local cities to make that a priority, to be up front of the decision making, instead of in the backside, create a nice hazard mitigation plan that most of the time just sits in somebody's shelves and doesn't get really used. But if it's in the general plan, it changes the dynamic of how it's used. So slowly we're going city by city. doing these safety elements, which includes fire hazard, it includes fire, earthquake, and all the issues that we have in California. But that's one of the things that we think is starting to work. We'll got to see is have some measuring. We have some measuring devices that we could put into that. But that's one solution. But your point of working with local responsibility areas is very, very important. And then solutions have come up for instead of a pools. So there's some water systems out there that is a water tank that you can set up in your property. And there's some special permits. We have now gotten to the point that helicopters can draw from just 40-inch depth that they can, meanwhile there's enough water in there, but from 40-inch depth. One example is that little pond outside of Pepperdine University. It's right up along, but it's not that deep. You can actually walk in there and it'd be waist height. But helicopters go there all the time. So there's some water tanks that are sold nowadays, and your community can actually apply for a grant to get one of these. And it'll be a fire hazard or fire reduction or another tool in there. And it's a lot easier to install those because they don't go into the pool category, they go into fire prevention category. So there's some solutions out there. But then again, it goes to have that that knowledge within the city, the staff to understand that part. Lastly, for the treatment of your hillside, yes, we see it slowly. We call it brush clearance for a long, long time, and brush clearance is a misnomer, and we tend to put the attention to that. Close to the Taylor Payne Foundation, if you actually go to the Taylor Payne Foundation, stand up in it's a little area that is higher than everything else in there, and that's what they call it, the fire, where they developing the fire resistant landscape in there as a demonstration landscape. You can look straight southwest, and it's a home that is surrounded by Italian cypresses, a couple of eucalyptus, but you look downhill from that home, it's 300 feet of nothing. Everything has been, and then you see the home itself. The home itself is at 1950s or 60 homes with no hardening and all that. So the science now tells us that embers can easily pass those 300 feet, actually speed up on those 300 feet to get to the home. And the home is just like a catcher's mitt receiving all those embers, especially this type of vegetation around it. So I think it's slowly changing. The understanding of how it's changing varies city by city, county by county. And that's what this type of conversations can help us kind of bring everybody to the same table on how to deal with that. So it's not completely clearance, it's vegetation management around your homes. The word clearance is not the right word, is management is the right word. And I would like to suggest that. And then lastly, starting with the home, it'll be a good thing to do. So I don't know, you being arrested, you're in LA County, love to come to your house and give you some pointers you like. So how do we do with time, Ben?
I think Clark wants to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there was a lot in there, Brandon. First of all, I think you mentioned your Northeast. I would definitely encourage you to get trained, actually, because you seem to be an activist in the community, or at least you're aware, in home ignition zone evaluations. And we have a class. If you go to the rcdsmm.org website, we've got a class coming up, because there's still a lot of counterintuitive stuff there. Some of what you're saying, I can't picture it, but yeah, eucalyptuses, maybe depending where they're located, definitely not an ideal plant. That's within potentially, I don't know your jurisdictional situation. As far as the regional work, looking at what a Firewise community is, that's actually the thing I was trying to remember that gives you a rebate off of, if you're on Fair Plan, you get 10% off. Because, you know, regional fire, we don't get into life safety and structure protection analysis as a collective, right? So when you're talking about a pond, that's really something you want to work with your fire professionals, because you might have an idea about, hey, if we had water here, and then the fire department says, look, here's 8 reasons why that we won't be able to use that. So I think it's about getting trained on what really the problem is, and then educating your community, because you seem to be working with them. And then I'm with you that county's not, you know, not above needing education in certain departments as well. But I think I would start with that. Like when you come to regional fire suppression strategies, that's for pros. And I'm not qualified to comment on that. What we do is work with them to talk about places where you might need additional defensible space for firefighters as opposed to for your house, because there's a difference. And that's also a regional thing, goes along with your safe zones. And so there's a bigger strategic plan. So I would just, you know, separate those two out, community versus home, and then get yourself trained so you can help, you know, after you're, you know, the ins and outs, you can teach others.
I appreciate the feedback on that, Clark. In my neck of the woods, things are a little different because we have such high turnover with the county. We've gone through 4 building officials in 3.5 years. So it's unfortunate. They have such bad turnover, and a lot of people aren't qualified and competent in the roles that they're put into to even start talking about stuff like this. A lot of my experience comes from working energy storage. I'm a C10 electrical contractor, E1, E2 electrical inspector, and applications engineer. But mine comes from a love for the environment. But energy storage is really big on people's houses of getting those gates open, right? Maybe you have a horse property up there and fire department rolls up and they have to go through, yes, you can ram through a gate, but if they have to ram through 16 gates to get to where they're going, because you have a community with a lot of houses that are in trouble and they're back up against a canyon, that can do a lot of damage to the trucks. So that's when I first started working with the county on, hey, how do we get energy storage back up? SGIP program through California, you know, to get stuff up and running, to keep wells working, right? People want to use their sprinkler systems in a fire situation. They have so many great control systems now where you can, from a remote location, energize your sprinklers on your hillside.
Hey,
That helps a
Brandon,
lot. Yeah.
as an engineer, I'd also ask you to look at fluid dynamics and think about embers. And then the other thing that we teach straight up in our trainings is that make sure you've got the ability to open your gate to leave, and you don't have to come back to your house or help the fire department get there because your house is going to be okay without you. Yeah. That's the key. It really, you can't count on the county. Ordinances, fire code, well, any code, I'm an architect, we all know the code is the code official. So you can't rely, it's a blunt instrument. Ordinances are a blunt instrument. It really starts with a house and this specific design, and you empower yourselves and just say, hey, and Tim had a good comment here, start with a house so it won't ignite, and then look at the landscape and say, how would I defend from fire if my landscape caught fire? And you design from that perspective, as opposed to how do I get the county to let me clear out what we call habitat, not brush. And county will, and you're just not going to win that. You're not going to win that fight. It's particularly if it's a public edge, right? It's maybe even on 5 acres, you're still going to have, but it's not going to help you anyway. What's going to help you is having the knowledge and designing specifically your own home so that you can leave it and it won't ignite. And the gates.
And the worst thing that can happen in the world is someone leaves, can activate remote, turn on their sprinkler system, and their gate stops working because utilities cut, and their well stops working, and their booster pump. And then firefighters up there, and they can't find a water source that's, you know, well within a, you know, you can cut into a tank.
Yeah, and you're proving our point, Brandon. Like everything you're saying means don't let your house ignite. And it's possible. It's really not that hard to do. It doesn't have to be a steel house, like Tim was saying. It's just but it's not necessarily what you think it is. So take one of those trainings and I can tell you'll impact the neighborhood a lot positively if you do that.
What happens if I want a steel house? I mean, some of us like that look.
Hey, you're welcome.
I just want to make a quick mark on time here. We have time for maybe another question or two before we go to our virtual tour with Mikey, and I appreciate the questions and informed questions, Brandon. Anyone else have any questions for the panel? Feel free to drop them into the chat. I don't know if anyone here on the panel sees any that we haven't addressed, and there was a few that came in earlier. It looks like they all got addressed in the chat though.
Yeah, well, I just was wondering from Tim, you mentioned something in there. Tim, is anything you want to add up to the comments that we just had?
You know, one thing I did want to make sure was brought up was there's been some talk about the role of government and law in home hardening. And there was some question about insurance. There was a development on this yesterday. I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but something very important to keep an eye on is Commissioner Ricardo Lara, the state insurance commissioner, submitted which is a pretty, California, we're always first in this. So what he is going to start requiring, what is going to be required of insurance companies is a couple of things, assuming this passes, which it appears like it will in the next, it'll be 30 days out. Two things. Number one, insurance companies will be required to submit a second set of pricing for homeowners that have implemented FireWise strategies and implementations, hardening of roofs, et cetera. So you will start to see some discounts on premiums as a result of that. I think this is a big first step. I got to be honest, it's kind of like sometimes we feel like Noah, it's not raining yet, but we've got this boat built and we're like, come on, everybody, let's get on this boat. Let's harden our homes. And without the financial incentives, it's difficult to get people on board with that. And then the second thing that is going to be required of the insurance companies is they're going to be required to tell you what your score is or what your home score is. Right now, if you're in Malibu, if your zip code is 90265, you're going to be lucky to get homeowners insurance. It'll be the worst, most expensive coverage that money can buy. If you can get it at all. And it's not necessarily based on wisdom, it's purely based on your zip code. So now we're going to have a little bit more transparency and hopefully some discounts coming down from the insurance carriers, which both is much needed. So please keep an eye on that. I see Amy just put the link in the chat. Thank you, Amy, for that.
Any other questions? We can take maybe one more question.
This is Bob Large. I've got a question.
Go ahead, Bob.
Our neighborhood, which is mostly 2 to 4 acre areas in rural Antelope Valley, about 2 years ago, received many truckloads of mulch that were brought from the Los Angeles basin. So we have acres of mulch lying around us. Is that a bad thing? Or, do we have to clear that out to be fire safe?
Did you guys hear the question? It's basically they had a lot of mulch that was dropped off around the property. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think was the question.
Yes.
Was the mulch intended for use on properties or is it being stored? I don't understand the situation.
It was spread in several inch thickness around on the property.
So an adjacent private property.
This is all private property, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Cassie, do you want to talk about mulch or that's imported from?
Oh, I've spoken, I've actually called Jay multiple times on this matter. And I do think under certain circumstances, mulch has some really protective qualities. Like if you look at an oak canopy and the natural oak leaf litter that builds up and holds, keeps the soil hydrated and the entire area cooler. That in and of itself and turns into sort of a moist sort of brick package, if you will, rather than how people imagine mulch, which is sort of flying around in loose material. So I do think that mulch in a microsystem that you create, and certainly in a hardened zone 0 5-foot clearance, and tree placement that's adequate, and irrigation that hydrates. I do think that in this context that mulch offers so many benefits and helps us. And in other contexts, I can't quite imagine what Bob is saying. It sounds like basically a giant field of mulch. We already talked about a giant field where embers basically pick up speed and roll to points of ignition. So I think anywhere where you just have these open fields of bowling alleys, essentially, that's it. Really, whatever material you have, it's probably not going to work very well.
So the resource ecologist in me heard that and thought, because we have a program with mulch, and it's funded by a wildfire resilience grant. And so mulch, but what we do is in this program, we chip what is properly on the basis of true need managed every year in a wildland urban interface. You create a pile of that material that came from your property on your property, and then we mix it with compost from our local water district, which provides compost for free. And that does two things. It significantly reduces the ignition probability for that mulch as opposed to dry mulch. We also know where it came from. So if it has invasive seed bed, it was already there and it's staying there. So it's not imported from somewhere and creating weed, which can be a fire problem. And then it sequesters carbon. So it's activated. And that's in fact the smart intern whose idea it was, when I said, okay, you're an intern, come up with an idea that stores carbon, because this was a few years ago and it's all about carbon. And the idea that he explored was, hey, we chip this stuff every year. If we add compost, it increases its carbon storing capacity greatly, and it's less ignition prone. So that's just something about mulch, since you brought it up.
Well, in the interest of time, I might suggest we move to our virtual tour here with Mikey in just a moment. I want to say thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you for Jay for moderating, and thank you all for your patience with some of our technical difficulties here. No matter how much you practice, something always happens down the stretch. But thank you very much. And if you still have questions, the great news is that after our virtual tour, we're going to go to some breakouts. And the whole goal in that is that you can go in, ask your questions, have long, detailed conversations, and we hope that you can bring some of that to the breakout sessions we're going to have in just a moment. All right, Mikey, you ready on your end?
Yeah, let's go. Okay, I'm going to show everyone my home in Malibu, the Malibu West neighborhood that survived the Woolsey fire. Malibu West was one of the first neighborhoods in my town that was hit by the fire. And I'm one of the people that stayed behind and tried to save as many homes as possible. About 3 years before the fire, we bought this home. It was a 1964 original home. It was actually a hoarder's house. It was in terrible shape. And my brilliant designer wife tackled the job of remodeling it. My request was that she make the home as fire resilient as possible, or as made sense for us at the time. And we really had no idea how important that would turn out very, very soon. So I'm going to show you what worked and what we would have done differently after surviving the Woolsey fire, because I learned a lot after the fire. There'll be a couple awkward seconds during the presentation as I multitask and change a few videos out. So just hang in there with that. That should be really quick. And please stop me at any time with questions and comments. But the first thing I'm going to show you is a peek at sort of what we faced starting on November 8th, 2018. So Hang on just 1 second here.
I'm so sorry, Pat. So sorry. It wasn't enough of us. Couldn't get to it. Matthews? Got your lucky stars at the moment. We tried, we saved as many as we could. There's only like 5 of us and no firemen at the time, 0. We really, really tried. We worked our asses off.
Okay, clearly I'm a little emotional there at the time. Now, I am going to, just takes a second here, sorry. I'm going to share parts of our house. Give me one second here.
While you're setting up the next video, would you be willing to share that with the group, as far as I'd love to show that video to like my parents and others that might be, well, I'm in a residential neighborhood. Sure, I back up to a field, but our house should be fine. And that right there shows you, even if you're close contact with other houses, you're not safe on stuff like that.
We've also recorded the session, Brandon, and it'll be available afterwards. So
Wonderful.
Well, for anyone here, to be honest, I can send a link to all my photos and videos from the fire. It's not a big deal. I'm happy to, or individual ones. Either one's fine.
Very much.
Yeah, of course, of course. Okay, let's try this one now. Oops, sorry. Okay, so here's the front of my house. This is what took the brunt of the embers and the smoke and the wind from the fire. The garage door here is definitely the most exposed part of the house. It's made of wood, but interesting, this is not fireproof paint. It is actually just thick black paint, which really actually made a huge difference because it didn't allow anywhere for the embers to make purchase on the door. So not fireproof, but it really helped. The big problem here is this seal at the bottom on the garage door. And we identified that during the Woolsey fire that was an issue. So I had to pile like rocks and pebbles and stones in there. But that's a huge entry point for embers to get blasted in there and catch something in the garage on fire. And it is certainly still a concern. It's hard to fix. Moving on here, come on video, roll. So the front door area, as you can see in the whole walls, there's really nothing burnable here. Now I'd probably move that chair if another fire is coming, but it's probably not going to ignite. There's nowhere for embers to make purchase here. It's all stucco, it's hardy board, etc. And if we were to redo the house, I certainly would probably not put plants right up against it. But this is a critical point I want to pause on. None of the plants on my property caught fire. Why? They're all healthy and there's no debris underneath them to catch fire. So healthy plants, what happened here is they acted to actually catch embers. These strawberry trees, as they're called on the left, caught embers, and it actually helped. Now, of course, removing those cushions is really important when a fire comes or in fire season. I missed one cushion before the fire hit us when we were preparing. And later on, I found 27 holes burned in that cushion. So we were absolutely pelted at high speed with embers. Moving on here. Lastly, at the end here, I want to point out our wood fence connects to the house. This is actually now, because of the codes we changed after 500 homes burned down, this is not allowed in new development in Malibu. You cannot have a wood fence connect to your house because, as we discovered, my son and I, going around the neighborhood and other neighborhoods during and after the fire, the fence catches fire, burns to the house, catches the house on fire, particularly railroad ties and things like that. Once again, the paint helped it a lot. And it's too bad it's really hard to see, but straight ahead, you can see the bottom of a giant eucalyptus tree. You cannot see it here. I apologize for that. One of the interesting thing is that eucalyptus tree, and actually no trees in my neighborhood caught fire, which is was very confusing to me after the fire, especially the eucalyptus. What we discovered, and it took a while, is healthy plants, healthy trees without debris in them, with no debris below that can catch fire, then catch the tree on fire, and no like loose bark. They don't burn down. They don't catch fire, or they did not in our neighborhood. Next door to us is the Malibu Park neighborhood. Bigger homes, beautiful homes. 100 of them burned down. There's a lot of reasons why, but a lot of their trees were not maintained. We have an HOA which kind of insists on everyone maintaining their plants. So hang on a second. I am going to saw somebody mention, yes, the arson grass, invasive found grass, still in the front yard. Gosh, where do you see that? But anyhow, we do have a couple of plants there that I agree with you. Once again, they're healthy, did not ignite, but I don't disagree with you. We have learned a lot since the Woolsey fire. Let me get the next video up. It just takes a second here.
You're doing a great job of navigating these videos, by the way, Mikey. This is great.
I'm just making it up. That's all. Okay, hang on a second. So this video is probably one of the more boring ones here, but essentially this is towards the backyard. One of the things we did here was we put in a raised seam metal roof, and it was expensive, to be honest. And I was really iffy about it. It was not in our budget. Boy, did it feel good when the fire came roaring through this neighborhood. The other very obvious thing now, the house was built on purpose with no attic. So there is no vented attic on this house. We still have some vents, and there's more than it shows here. There's still some up there, but as was already said, so I don't need to cover it. You know, one of the first key things you have to do is cover your vents. Interestingly, one of the way ash got in our house, I never saw coming. We have quite a few skylights, and the wind was so strong and the ash was so fine that it blew through the seal on the some of the skylights. And when I came back into the house during and after the fire, there was little piles of ash, and I was like, what the heck? And they're really neat because there's no wind in the house, so it just fell straight down, and that did a fair amount of damage. So ash or smoke and ash damage, about $30,000 in damage. So interesting things that you have to think of. And of course, closing and locking all the doors in an event like that. Lastly, it goes without saying, you have to keep your gutters clean, or screen your gutters. That'll catch fire, and that'll get hot enough most of the time that it can get under the sort of the cap of the roof. And once it gets into that tar paper, your house is, you know, quite likely to be in a whole lot of trouble. Give me 1 second here. And now I'm going to share a video of not protecting your vents, or not venting your house. Give me 1 second. I'm going to put sound on this one. This video was literally 10 minutes after the fire entered our neighborhood. And when it entered our neighborhood, it sounded like a Boeing jet, and it was so powerful, it was picking up the earth and raining rocks on us. So it was pretty crazy. But this was about 10 minutes later. We were sitting up here fighting the fire, and all of a sudden we had this. Oh, wait, I forgot one thing. I forgot to share it. It's really important, it turns out. Okay.
What was that? Devil!
So just a short video there, but the point is that it took me 2 months to figure out, because I didn't know at the time, how did that house burn and how did it just explode? I mean, literally the second we heard a noise and turned around, it wasn't quite that involved. The entire house is on fire. Embers went in, and it only took about 10 minutes till it was a cooking fire in the attic, I assume. And I slightly missed it on the video, but there was a boom sound. And we turned around, the whole house is on fire. The landscaping was catching fire. And it was, it shows the power of what Tim and everyone are saying. You know, if you're going to start somewhere, from what I saw in the Woolsey fire, start with vents. It's certainly the most affordable thing. And we lost 15 homes and a small apartment building in my neighborhood out of 238 homes. And every single one burned down from embers. Not one home burned down from direct contact with fire. Sec. Playing with videos for a second here. Okay. All right. So here's another view of a house with a double pane windows, some non-burnable clearance, but still some plants up against the house. Once again, healthy plants, kept clean, nothing burned, nothing ignited in the fire. The yard, which actually during during the pandemic, my wife one day at a time completely redid. It was very drought resistant before, and now it's got more life in it. And it's still all the plants are drought resistant. It's beautiful. It's alive. She did a great job. We have hummingbirds and bees, but it also cools the backyard, which is great. And so it allows us to keep the house cooler. So it's more energy efficient. I just had to show that in. I show that to you. And once again, I know it's slightly different than at the fire, but nothing burned. Backyard sitting area, umbrellas, clearly. Oh, hi, Jack. There's my dog. All those cushions need to be removed yet again. The umbrellas need to be removed. And now the podocarpus in back with that same wood fence. Podocarpus, great. It's a hedge all around our house for various reasons, just because it's a kind of tightly packed neighborhood. Didn't burn, worked out well. The fence didn't catch fire. My wife insisted on painting the fence black, which actually worked out really well, seemed to have made it more fire resilient. But now we come to the reason you harden your home. Come on, camera. It's going to swing up here in 1 second. I'm going to force it to. This is my neighbor's backyard. It is filled with palm trees that he does not maintain. And during the Woolsey fire, it was worse. These palm trees were a disaster. I don't know how. I still don't get it. Despite the ember storm, they did not ignite for him. Every other palm tree in my neighborhood burst into flames. These, I still have no idea why. So the one thing you can't do is control other people necessarily. He did prune them once, but already clearly it needs it again. And he's, in 8 years, he's done it once. So you have to take care of your own property. I don't think there's any other option. So my message in my town as a elected official is, everyone, you have to protect your own home. We cannot force other people always to make their home more fire resilient or fire safe, or just actually be neighborly. So that doesn't always work out that way. Hang on a sec. I'm going to catch us up on time. Oh, no, it's 5:30. I'm not catching us up. Give me a second. Last video, really, Danielle wanted me to show this one. She liked it, and I'll explain why. So here's the house. Once again, there's plants up against it, and that's great. But the reason she wanted me to show this is the night of the fire. We'd been fighting the fire all day. My son and I, he and I stayed, everyone else evacuated. And we were exhausted. We tried to go to, we'd been up since 2 a.m. It was now 2 in the morning. We've been up 24 straight hours. We were exhausted. We kept having to kind of get back up out of bed because there was a house across the street that just kept trying to burn down because they had a lot of, they had wood all over their backyard, wood and other debris. And finally we went to sleep. And as I lay down on the pillow of the bed you just saw, there was 3 fully engulfed houses on the ridge. And I can't tell you how surreal it is to go to sleep with burning homes with 50-foot flames in your view. And there you go. So I shared that because Danielle wanted me to. So the message, just to wrap up, I made that as quick as I could, is the house isn't perfect. I also have solar because where we live, we lose power all the time. The solar is fairly new. It works fantastic. Matter of fact, I think our air is on right now and we're still sending energy back to the grid even right now. So that's awesome. But it's more livable in a fire zone when the power keeps going out. And during Woolsey, there's no power, there's no communication, there was nothing. So with that, I'll take any questions or any comments, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mikey. Thank you for sharing your home. Any questions for Mikey? We are going to transition to our breakouts right now, which he will be participating in. So actually, maybe we'll just do that. And if you have some questions for Mikey, you can join with it.
Abu, we did have goats in our neighborhood. It was awesome. It was the biggest community event we've ever had. They were amazing. It was the first year we had them. 200 goats, the whole neighborhood turned out, government agencies turned out. I'm trying to get the city to do the same thing next year. So yes, I'm a big fan of
Yes, yes on goats.
Yes,
we're all fans of goats. Everybody likes goats. Well, thank you for you sharing your home with us again, Mikey. Really appreciate it. I'm just gonna talk here for a moment before we go to our breakouts. We have partnered with the California Clean Air Day. So if you're not familiar with the Coalition for Clean Air, they do this day every year. The reason I bring this up is because issues around air quality are highly related to fire, especially here in Southern California. I just want to make sure all folks are aware of some of the statistics around air quality issues. The Coalition for Clean Air has been having this pledge here for, I don't know how many years now, but continues to grow. You can make a pledge as an individual, for your family and your kids, or as an organization. And so just wanted to broadcast this on behalf of our partners, the Coalition for Clean Air. Businesses can also make a pledge to do what they can to improve air quality. So with that, we're going to go to our breakouts. You'll be able to select your breakout. There's always a little bit of a challenge here as we put these together. You'll be able to choose your room. So when we launch the rooms, if you're on a computer, you should be able to choose your room. If you are on an iPad, you may have a bit of a challenge. So I'd just ask you to hang with us for a moment. You can let us know in the chat which room you want to go into, and we will put you in the room. So hold on one second, about to launch these out there. And then once you see them again, you can select the room. If you're on a computer, it should work well that way. If you are on an iPad, sometimes we have folks who have a bit of a challenge. Just let us know what room you want to go into in the chat, and we'll drop you into those rooms.
Ben, just real quick, how much time do we have?
Yeah, so we basically, we're going to keep the breakouts open until about 5:55. And you can move around between the breakouts. So you should be able to move between rooms. You can come here into the main room, and then we can drop you into the room where needed. So I'm going to go ahead. Welcome back from the breakout rooms. I make this joke every time, but it's a little bit like coming back from the Matrix. You're back now in the main room.
Do I take a deep breath like I survived?
Either that or you're still in the Matrix, you just don't know. You haven't.
I feel like I'm in the Matrix because there's like a grid of little heads everywhere.
Really appreciate everyone making the time today. I'm gonna try to get us out of here on time. I just want to remind everyone that we are launching certifications for landscapers and contractors starting this month to the end of the year. We'll be offering these for free for landscapers and contractors. We've also received funding to continue to offer these courses for free through the end of next year. We're really excited about that. And I want to thank our partners again at RCD SMMM, Resource Conservation District of Santa Monica, and at Theodore Payne Foundation for helping us with this training. Hopefully we'll see a number of you at mini golf next week. It's always a good time. It will be cooler and it benefits a good cause. Hopefully you can join us next week. And if you're inspired by any of the work we're doing, again, anything you can spare helps our small but mighty team continue to put on content like this. You can donate by texting green to 707070. And with that, our ask to you is just stay connected, stay engaged, keep doing the good work. We'll be sending out the recording of this as well as links to resources in a follow-up email to everyone who registered, and the recording will be available for free on our website. So thank you for everyone for sharing their insights today, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Have a good evening and stay cool out there.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Be safe. See you soon.
Bye.
That was fun. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. So you did a great job, Mikey. You might have a career here in virtual tours. You know,
I agree.
I don't know about that, but it was yeah, I played around with it. I'm like, oh, I can't open all the videos at once. They only open one at a time. I'm like, huh, all right. Figure that
I
out.
thought you did a really good job, actually. We have a guide for virtual tours usually when it's like a more organized thing, but it seemed like you guys had it under control. So you did a good job.
I did what I do best. I just made it up as I went. So
Well, if you ever get tired of being an elected official, Mikey, you know you've got
my last day is sometime in December. I'm not running again. So
awesome.
well, thank you, everybody.
That's
Thank
an
you.
opening right there, Ben.
There you go. I know. Yeah.
It's gonna be available.
Gonna be careful what I say, right?
I might actually have a life. It'll be really weird.
All right. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
7